Okay, let's see. Let's go ahead and get you going. Here we are. All right. Okay. Hey, everyone. Spidey Librarian here, and welcome to the Webline, a podcast about Spider-Man and his amazing world. Here we discuss all aspects of our favorite web-slinger in a fun, informal, but informative forum. I am your humble host, the Spidey Librarian, and today we're doing another character spotlight focused on the two characters that share the name Gwen Stacy. My friend and former fellow writer on Amazing Spider Talk, Jaleh Najafali, was able to meet up earlier with me this week and talk about Spider-Gwen along with the original Gwen Stacy and their individual and collective impact on comics and Spider-Man media. It was a fun discussion full of tangents and diversions, as well as focus on these characters, and I'm looking forward to playing it for you when we get to the main segment coming up in just a few minutes. Be sure to subscribe to the Webline on your favorite podcast service and leave us a like, review, and follow where appropriate. If you're on a service that doesn't carry the Webline, let me know by shooting me an email at spideylibrarian@gmail.com, and I'll do what I can to get it pushed out to you. Now, before we do a daring dive into our timely topic, it is time to dish on the latest spiderific developments of the last week with our knockout news segment, The Bugle Newsflash. For this week's episode of the Bugle Newsflash, I am kind of foregoing a lot of the news items that came out this week. It isn't because there is a lack of news, although things were kind of few and far between. There were a couple of reports about, for instance, being able to use accessibility options in Marvel's Spider-Man 2 to slow down combat, and a few other things of that nature. And while those things are not unimportant, I do want to talk about a topic that has kind of reared its head in the last week or so. And that is a fan film by the name of Spider-Man Lotus. Now, I am all about fan films and their kind of like their existence. I mean, I'm not only a Spider-Man fan, I'm also a Star Trek fan, and that is Star Trek people have been making fan films forever. And so I'm all in support of fans of the web slinger making fan films. Spider-Man Lotus is one that has gotten quite a bit of attention. I believe that Andrew Garfield has sort of I think he tweeted about it at one point. And the fan film itself had a production of, I think, over $100,000. And so the film recently came out. My understanding is that it's about 2 hours long. And I have heard a range of reviews about it. Most of them saying that it's not so good. However, there are some people that I trust that say it is good. I have not yet watched it, and I don't know if I'm going to. It's difficult in this day and age to separate art from the artist. I know it's technically possible, and there have been several occasions where I have successfully done that. However, there have been a lot of allegations about not only I believe it's like the producer or the director, the person in charge of the project, whose name I do not know offhand, but also like the main Spider-Man actor. They have said some very kind of unpleasant, possibly racist things, and have just kind of gone on record as being not entirely great people. And again, I'm in favor of fans making Spider-Man fan films. Hey, maybe one day I'll get to do something like that if I ever develop my video making skills and so on and so forth. I don't know. But I do know that at this point in time, it is difficult for me to kind of look at the allegations that have been made against these people and then kind of weigh that against the perceived quality of the fan film, which has been like a lot of the reviewers are probably watching this film through that lens of, oh my gosh, these guys are racist. This film sucks, you know? So I may kind of owe it to myself to watch the film simply out of a sense of I've only kind of just heard about this. Apparently, Spider-Man Lotus has been a thing for several years, and I didn't know it. So, that just shows you like that I need to keep a better eye on my sources of news as well. But I know about it now, and I think that you know in the long run, um, it's not just the things that you leave behind, the things that you make that are part of your legacy, especially in this day and age where we have social media, we have just the ability, we have mobile devices, people can record you without you knowing it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I guess part of what I'm part of what I'm trying to say is, in this day and age, it makes sense to kind of live not only like you're being recorded, because in all honesty, you probably are being recorded at some point. And I'm not trying to bring out, Big Brother or anything, but I want to urge people, Spider fans, Star Trek fans, whoever you are, just humanity in general, be yourself, be your truest self, and try to be a better person. Try always to be a better person. That means being your best on and off the field, like Ted Lasso would say. It means being your best version of yourself in front of the camera and when you're not in front of the camera. And that goes for anyone, including me, who puts themselves in front of a camera and essentially tries to put out a piece of art or media or something like that. And so I don't know if I'm going to watch Spider-Man Lotus. I am curious to see it. I am curious to see what a fairly small budget project will do. How it will do in the hands of someone who is essentially a fan. But at the same time, I am disturbed by the allegations that have been made by several people who worked on this project. And, again, the advice that I have for anyone who does really any type of work, but especially any creative endeavor, is always try to be your best self. Always be your best self. And if your best self is still not a good person, then aspire to be better. Do what you can to always work on yourself, because that's the important thing about being human in this crazy world. Excuse me. People are not perfect. I am certainly not perfect. But I definitely feel like I have come a long way, particularly in the last couple of decades, from being who I was to the person I am now. I feel I'm overall a more accepting person. I feel I'm a more patient person. And I am certainly someone who tries to look at things from as many different perspectives as I can before weighing in with a judgment. And so, again, Spider-Man Lotus, I don't know if I'm going to see it. I might. And if I do see it, I don't know if I'm going to comment on it. Because I don't know that it's fair to hold fan films to the same standard as we do, say, the films that I kind of retro review on this podcast. But I just think that to the people who worked on Spider-Man Lotus, not that I ever expect them to listen to this podcast or anything, my advice for you going forward is, again, try to put your best foot forward. And that goes beyond making a stellar Spider-Man fan project. It's also about being a good human being these days. And I think that is probably the most important piece of advice that I can give anyone on any particular topic. Whether that topic be dating or personal finance or Spider-Man in general. At the end of the day, it all comes down to being human and trying to be your best self. Thank you for listening to this special topic within the Bugle News Flash. All right. And that is all of the Spidey news for this week. Today's segment is the character spotlight featuring Gwen Stacy. And I've got to say, one of the things I love about putting this podcast together is how doing so helps me reconnect with friends and acquaintances who want to talk about Spider-Man's world. I was able to get in touch with Jaleh Najafali, who was a fellow writer on the Amazing Spider Talk website a few years ago, and she was gracious enough to come onto the web line and talk about both of the main iterations of Gwen Stacy and to catch up with me. It was a conversation that was wide-ranging and fun, and I'm happy to play it for you here. Stick around for the full dialogue, and I'll see you on the other side to close out the show and tell you what the topic of the next episode will be. Here we go. And welcome to the character spotlight segment of this episode. I am here with my friend and longtime associate, Jaleh Najafali. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. And we used to both write for the Amazing Spider Talk website or Superior Spider Talk website. I don't remember which one it was, but it was the companion website to the Amazing Spider Talk podcast, which is run by Dan Gvozden, who has also been on the show here. Jaleh, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing very well. It has been a while since we have seen each other, so it's been nice to kind of catch up with you. And today we are going to talk a little bit about the character of Gwen Stacy. And what I kind of enjoy about this character, I'm throwing up air quotes for those of you who are listening, but we really are going to be talking about two characters. We're going to be talking about the character that Peter lost in the night Gwen Stacy died. And then we are also going to be talking a lot about Spider-Gwen, as she's popularly known, or Ghost Spider, or whatever you want to call her now. But the newer, younger Gwen, who is also she's a variant of Spider-Man. So, Jaleh, I would like to go ahead and just start off by asking, what what do you what are your feelings towards these two characters, and as they relate to being kind of this one entity?
I like both characters, definitely. They're both totally, even though they're both Gwen Stacy, they're two totally separate characters, I think. And I mean, you can see, some of their similarities in their background and things like that. But I think personality wise and the types of storylines they're getting are still totally different. Obviously, I mean, we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but love interest Gwen Stacy was a lot of her backstory was like love interest kind of things, and
Yes.
Spider-Gwen is a little bit more fleshed out and I think much more approachable for a lot more modern readers.
I certainly would agree there. I guess again, since we're going to be talking about two characters, whenever I bring up a topic for each, it's going to be like, okay, this applies to. I'm going to call her original Gwen Stacy, and then we're going to, I'm just going to call the other one Spider Gwen because that just seems to work. So, but the introduction for Gwen Stacy, I guess let's go ahead and start with the original. Her intro, as you said before, she was just kind of part of Peter's friends group. My understanding is that she was rather antagonistic towards Peter at first, and then I think it was shortly after Steve Ditko left, she kind of got moved into love interest Gwen Stacy. How much of that character's history are you familiar with? Have you read directly, or have you read about?
I've read probably about a lot of it,
Mhm.
and directly. Obviously, I've read the night that Gwen Stacy died, and I've read. I had a very ambitious goal of reading every single Spider-Man comic. Uh, the older ones take quite a bit longer to get through generally, even though they're good. So I am somewhere in the middle of their sort of dating history and where she's sort of suspicious of him flaking on her all the time.
Right, right. Those old comics are actually pretty dense. Like they have a whole lot of text, squeezed into every panel, which is really funny because there was a time in my life when I was trying to create my own comics, and a lot of my friends would tell me, "You got too much text per panel," and I'm like, a lot of comics were made that way, but they are very dense and they can be very difficult to get through. So like I've been there too. I think I've maybe gotten through the first like 10 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, and that it takes a little while. So um but what what do you think of Gwen, that particular Gwen, as Peter's kind of love interest? Like, my understanding, and again, like you, I've read the night Gwen Stacy died. I've read the issues where her father gets killed while Spider-Man is battling Doc Ock. And then I read on a little bit after that where this politician tries to use her father's death to kind of like manipulate her for his own candidacy for public office or something, and basically kind of makes her into like this very unflattering type of character. So like part of it is just that like I feel like from what I've read that she does kind of primarily seem to be there as Peter's cheerleader and like Spider-Man's detractor. But I also kind of feel like she was like they kind of did some things to her that I wasn't too crazy about either.
Oh yeah, definitely. I totally agree. I think a little bit of that is like the times, right? Because they want her to
Yes.
be a love interest and that's what she's there for. And I've definitely read things, not to bring up MJ too soon, but where they're like, oh, people thought MJ was more interesting, and I think that's because MJ wasn't just a lot like she could go around and do things and flirt with guys, and that was fun for people to read. Whereas Gwen was sort of there more to be like, there are definitely comics where she's in it where I feel like she comes off as a quote unquote like nagging girlfriend kind of thing. Like,
Right.
oh, why can't Peter be here for me? Or why I need to break up with Peter because he, flaked on this or that. And
Right.
so I think a lot of Gwen's storyline is just tied to her sort of waiting around for Peter or wondering where he is. And that's not always the most riveting storyline. Although I do really, really like Gwen Stacy. Some of the panels where she's just like, I can't believe Peter flaked on me again, and she doesn't actually even hold. It would be more interesting to me if she were like, "This sucks. You suck. Like, we need to talk." Like where she called him out on it.
Right, right. And you could also make the argument that particularly like when they were married, that was kind of sometimes what happened with MJ too. It was almost like the writers didn't seem to know what to do with, it's one of the reasons you hear people make the argument that Peter cannot have nice things, because people don't know what to do with happy protagonists.
Yeah.
And I feel I guess I feel like you're right. I feel like that's kind of a product of the times. I know that a lot of kind of conventional knowledge for writing and drama is conflict, and you must, and so people just cannot be happy and be interesting, which I feel like in a lot of media that's slowly starting to begin to turn around. And when I say that, I think of shows like Parks and Rec and Schitt's Creek and stuff like that, where like people are being nice to each other and supporting and uplifting each other, and I feel like you get some of that in the like in Spider-Man No Way Home, and then like the Spider-Verse movies and everything, where there are like pockets of people trying to have each other's backs and do so in a way that is also interesting and wholesome and fun to watch, So, um, what did you? I assume you were reading comics when Spider-Gwen was introduced.
Yes.
So what I had the very fortunate honor of being able to review that one for the website at the time we were there. And I mean, I've definitely got some thoughts on that, but I would love to hear what you thought when you read that comic. Like what did it mean to you to pick up that comic and be like, "Oh wow, this is Gwen," you know?
I thought it was amazing because we haven't really got twist before.
Mhm.
um, where you see where you see a main character. Like all the Spider Women we've gotten before are, newer characters, which is fine. Jessica Drew, Silk, who I do not like, but like they're all characters that we don't have a lot of backstory for.
I didn't like Silk when Dan Slott introduced her. When people got Silk away from Dan Slott, she became so much better. But sorry,
No, that's
I'm
fine.
tangenting. So
But to pick up Spider Gwen, where there's this character with already a lot of backstory, and you come in and you sort of know who her dad's going to be, and you sort of have an idea of what her interests are, what she's going and for them to take that and put a little bit of a twist on it. Now she's in this band, and she's a little bit more fleshed out, has a little bit more personality. You can still see the bones of Spider-Man there, though, with the story about the lizard and Peter being the lizard. Like there are all these threads that you can tie to classic Spider-Man stories, and now you're seeing Gwen, this character that a lot of people at least know a little something about in that role. I thought was really cool.
yeah, and I mean, I really think the idea. I mean, for me, that whole comic was basically lightning in a bottle. Like, and I remember feeling like electrified when I read it. I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is going to be big. And I think that part of the appeal here was what little people at that time, like unless you were just kind of like us and reading all the back material, like what people knew about Gwen Stacy is that she was Spider-Man's girlfriend and she got killed by the Green Goblin. And so it felt like them just taking that character and making her like a spider sona, for lack of a better word, a spider person, Spider Woman. Um, it really kind of took that whole dynamic of what people knew and therefore kind of like connotated with that character as the kind of victimhood. It really kind of took it and turned it on its side. And it's like, okay, now she has the agency, and her friend Peter was the one that died and everything. And it I remember it being very like what yeah, why not have this story, like especially if it takes place in another dimension or multiverse or whatever you want to call it. Like, this is great. And I remember that art style too, man. That was some kinetic art style. I loved it. um I think it was it Robbie Rodriguez, I think, that did the artwork on that.
Yep.
And man, like, dude was, he had no problem just putting everything out there. Gwen was like, nope, got bit. I'm a drummer and I wear ballet shoes, and you guys can deal with it. It was a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
The
Um,
art was fantastic.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, Again, we're going to talk a little bit about, because we've talked about origin. Um, Character development. Let's go back to Gwen Stacy. One of the things that, like one of the kind of, what's the word? Not common knowledge, but one of the things that I tend to hear on the internet is that people give Gwen Stacy kind of a post-death halo. You know, that she was the one that got away and all this other stuff and everything, and that she just wasn't all that great a character if you actually go back and like read the issues. And to be fair, I have a lot of that reading to do. Um, but it kind of feels to me like what I have read is again, it's fairly standardized. It's she occasionally will uh, tell MJ to step off whenever MJ flirts with her. They have that good natured frenemies thing going on where it's like MJ's like, "Hey Pete, you want to dance?" and Gwen's like, "Hey MJ, you want me to rip your hair out?" kind of thing going on.
Yes.
But it's all, like it's all, her life seems to kind of exist in relation to Peter's, and I know that that's true with a lot of the supporting characters. Like their lives do exist in relation to Spider-Man. That's how they were designed. But aside from being a girl who is Peter's girlfriend, who has a cop for a father, I haven't yet seen much in the way of development for this character, um, at least up to that point. What have you read that you think might be noteworthy that I might have missed?
So I think I I don't know if I could point you to anything in particular
Okay,
because
that's perfectly fair.
my take on the comics that come out, like the comics from that sort of era, I don't think if you killed off any of those characters at that point, I think you could say the same thing about them. Like very few of them had any development or were like if you had killed off MJ, like she wasn't super developed at that point. She didn't have a career as an actress or,
Right.
anything like that. So I think you could probably say the same thing even about Harry, although Harry, you get a little bit more um,
Yeah,
development up
a little. Yeah,
because,
you do.
but uh, killed off Harry before all the like Osborn and Green Goblin of it all. Like there's not much to Harry until all of that really gets fleshed out a little bit more. So I think my point is more so that like if you take any of these characters, any of these side characters from like the 60s and 70s and kill them off, like I think 99% of the time you could be here, 40 years later, 50 years later and say, yeah, well, they weren't that, they weren't that great to begin with.
Oh yeah, I just realized. I think the year that the night Gwen Stacy came out was 1973. So yeah, we're 50 years on from that event now. And I mean, it's still a big enough event that like they showed it in the Amazing Spider-Man 2. Um, um, and so it keeps getting brought up and talked about, but like um it's just kind of one of those things that where like it felt like she did so far hasn't gotten a lot of development, didn't get a lot of development, and that's just kind of the way it was at the time. Now I do, and I said this to Dan too, and I don't want to keep bringing it up, but I find it hard not to. Jerry Conway, who, as Dan pointed out, was like 19 at the time that he killed off Gwen Stacy. Okay. Here's the thing. I've read what Jerry Conway had to say about why he killed off Gwen Stacy. And for me, I was just kind of like, really? Yeah, you had to kill her, huh? You couldn't have just put her on a bus and sent her away? I mean, that's been done before. And I think the reasoning was that, like, the reasoning that I didn't agree with was MJ was just better and more interesting, and therefore, Gwen was boring, and I just wanted to kill her off. Like that, I disagree with. I understand the need to like, make it so that they can never get together again, but like, I don't know. It's kind of like you said, like, at the end of the night Gwen Stacy dies, when MJ is given the choice to console Peter or not, and she stays behind and comforts him, like that's the beginning of them as a couple and her as a really significant part of his life, I feel. um she could have not, and she could have gotten on a bus and left his life, and the fandom would probably be okay, like, because she never would have gotten the chance to grow. And I feel like, I guess I feel like Gwen is kind of one of those people that never had the chance to grow. Like, I don't know. It's just kind of one of those things, and I know that like having her killed off it did the thing where it showed that, people are in danger, comic book characters can die. It arguably ended the Silver Age. He still did it just because he didn't like her, and then, it just, like, to me that just feels like petty. Like why did you do that? And I guess Stan Lee kind of was like, like he agreed to it, but I don't think he
Yeah.
realized he was agreeing to it, and later was like, wait, you killed her off? Why? So um hopefully that is not going to be the fate for this, for our current Gwen. I really don't feel like that's going to be a thing, you know. Um she is I, I feel like I think one of the funniest things about Spider-Gwen is that we call her Spider-Gwen, you know?
Yep.
Um she goes by Spider-Woman in her home dimension. And now that I think she's a part of 616, she's like Ghost Spider now,
Yeah.
which I think is also a hilarious name. But yeah, like what what significant events do you think this, like, new Gwen, Spider Gwen, has had since she was introduced? Like, what has stood out to you?
Honestly, the whole first run that they do, I
Mhm.
mean, so they do obviously the Spider-Gwen one-off during the not so great Spider-Verse comic series.
Right, the Edge of Spider Verse, yeah.
Yeah. So the Edge of Spider-Verse was great, and obviously we didn't know it was gonna spin off into this whole, um, like, solo series, but that whole initial first run of the solo series, I think, is fantastic. I think the comics where her dad finds out her secret are really interesting, especially because he's a cop. So it's a little bit different than, like, if Aunt May figures out that Peter's Spider-Man. Um,
Right.
I think it's a much higher stakes situation for Gwen to keep her identity a secret. And for the people in her life to find it out. And I did think it was interesting too, all the stories of her trying to balance her, like, band and school. Obviously you get that with a regular Spider-Man story and Peter not being able to balance it all.
Mhm.
But reading it as, reading about a woman trying to balance it all, which I think a lot of women talk about how they feel this, like, um, there's this onus on them to balance 500 different things at once and be great at all of them. I think that comes through a lot more reading Spider-Gwen for me than maybe a traditional Peter Parker story.
Uh, and I think on that first run, it mostly took place like in Spider Gwen's home dimension.
Yep.
And what I really liked about that, I just thought it was really cool, the inversions of a lot of characters from kind of like the prime Marvel Comics universe. Like uh like Matt Murdock is the Kingpin in her home dimension, which that just kind of blew my mind because I was like, that works, and they're like arch enemies. The Rhino is a little bit different, but a lot the same, so and she even had her own her own like lame villains, like the Bodega Bandit, which I thought was awesome.
Love Bodega Bandit.
Yeah, no, he was great. He was great. And but no, I really felt like I really liked, I think one of the initial stories that I remember reading was when she was like, she's putting away a criminal and basically tells the cops as they arrive, she's like, "Oh, hey, here you go." And they like pull a gun on her and shoot her, and she like dodges and then like knocks the guy down, and then gets in his face. She's like, "Hey, I'm trying to help you," you know? And
Yes.
I really kind of like, because you don't, you see I guess a little bit of that with Peter, but you don't like, she really kind of was like, "Hey, stop it. I'm on your side. You may not like me, but I'm, like, this guy is a criminal over here that I just webbed up for you. Arrest him, take the credit for it, leave me alone," and it was just kind of like, I know Peter has felt like that before, but like, in Gwen's position, and she's also like a college student at the time. So, she's got a lot of that, I like to call it youthful snark to her, and
I
it's go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think too, thinking about like this is obviously a teenage, like a late teens kind of Gwen, and then, but when you read like Peter Parker when he's in his late teens, at least as somebody living in the like 2000s now, um, when you read those early comics and Peter's like this outcast teenager, it's not as super relatable. Like, because you'll read things where Peter kind of gets shunned or he can't balance things and disappoints somebody and gets uninvited for something. But then people try and include him. And when you read these early comics, half the time he tells them like, I don't need any of you people, like he's
Yeah.
like, I don't need to be around any of you all. Like, I don't need high school friends, whatever. Like sometimes he gets a little bit too angsty about it. Whereas
Yeah.
Gwen, I think, is a much easier and more understandable like teenage character because she still has a little bit of angst and definitely that snark, but she's a little bit more of a sympathetic read, I think, maybe.
Well, and I think in Across the Spider-Verse, where we got a chance to see a lot more, I think, from her viewpoint during that film. Um, and I mean, like, she's obviously gone through some trauma already. She lost her friend Peter Parker. She's on the run from the police. And so like she kind of develops this, I would say, kind of this learned kind of loner persona, like, just everyone stay away from me, I'm only in this band drumming because I'm hoping I can hit my problems, kind of thing. And so like, it feels like this character has kind of taken that, um that angst. I guess you could say that angst feels a bit more earned than it might from Peter back in the day, as we're reading it now, and
Oh,
so and I mean, I know they did like a reboot of Spider-Man with like Ultimate Spider-Man, which is, really good run. Um, but like, even then, a lot of his angst came from him being bullied because he was smart.
right.
And it was less of him being angsty about that and more of him kind of lashing back and, being more like, more of, I don't know, if he more testosterone, kind of thing, than 1960s Peter, I suppose you could say, and and I kind of like whenever they do another Spider-Man story, whether it's a new Peter story, or or using Gwen, for instance, they really kind of take that time and update it and hopefully give a more relatable reason as to why there might be some angst, why there might be some distance, some spikiness between the the protagonist and their erstwhile like friends and allies and things like that. So, um, but it's like, it's one of the reasons that I think that Gwen is a lot more relatable spider persona than like even old school Peter is. And the same goes for like Miles and stuff like that, because I think you've just got these characters being written today with a lot of the concerns that people have today, like informing their origin story, And I know people say they're sick of origin stories, but superheroes got to have an origin, you know?
Yep.
So, um, so I think by virtue of just the decades, it's easy to understand why a lot of these newer iterations of some of these characters are more relatable to, say, a younger reading audience, um Gwen has been portrayed in, obviously, the comics, like quite a few of the comics. We've seen her in some of the animated shows, and we've also we've seen her in some video games, actually, too. Are you familiar with Gwen outside of the comics at all? Like, have you seen her on any of the shows or anything?
So I've seen her in obviously Into the Spider Verse and the Spider Verse movies. Um, Amazing Spider-Man, of course.
Right.
Uh, so definitely all of the movie Gwens I'm pretty familiar with.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think of I don't know if I've seen her in any of the Marvel TV shows, because I think the last Marvel TV show I really paid attention to would have been like 90s Spider-Man.
Okay. Which I know that Felicia Hardy was in there. I
I
don't
don't think
remember if Gwen is in there.
if she is, I don't remember her because I remember Felicia and I
Yeah.
definitely don't remember Gwen in that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Um the when I think of Gwen from any of the animated properties, Spectacular Spider-Man is what comes to mind. I have you seen that?
I've seen it here and there. I definitely have not seen all of it.
Oh, I highly recommend it. It's fun to
Okay.
watch. There are a whole lot of people online that say that that is actually the best animated Spider-Man out there. And I have a hard time disagreeing with them because I did love the 90s animated show as well. It's been forever since I've watched it. But Spectacular, like, it only lasted 2 seasons. But in the time that they had, it was a really good kind of like, we're going to take kind of all of the touchstone stories from Spider-Man's runs in the comics, and we're gonna rearrange the order. We're gonna modernize them a little bit. But Gwen is like there pretty much from the beginning. She's one of Peter's like best friends, and she very clearly has a thing for him, and he is kind of like oblivious throughout most of it. And she looks very different initially from the way that she does in the comics. She wears glasses, her hair is a little bit shorter and styled differently and everything. But like as things come out and they start to kind of fall for each other, she eventually loses the glasses. She starts to look a lot more like she did in the original comics. And and when season 2 like ended, I was just like, but I want more, and I wanted to see, because I don't think they would have killed Gwen off. Like this is a kids cartoon, so
Right.
I have a really hard time. I understand that that's a canon event, I suppose, but like I don't see how they could have killed off Gwen or her father in that show, where the intended demographic was like 6 to 11 or 6 to 12-year-old kids or something like that.
Right.
So I really would have liked to have known what they were going to do, and unfortunately, I think that's something we're never going to get. Um, we've said a lot about Gwen in the movies. What what to you are some of the most significant like scenes or events from the movies that center around either iteration of Gwen for you?
So I mean, hot take. I'll probably get a lot of hate for this. I
Go
I
for it.
love Gwen Stacy from Amazing Spider-Man. I think um,
I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think a lot of people loved Gwen from those movies.
it's so good, and their relationship is so good, and I think the movies do a pretty good job of still giving her a personality and a backbone that you don't really see necessarily in the comics. So they take sort of that base layer that you have in the comics of Gwen Stacy, and they build it up. They make her more interested in science, and she clearly has a life outside of Peter, even though she wants to be with Peter. Um, I think, I mean, I know I love um, the Zendaya MJ, but I think the Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone pairing was probably my favorite of the live action
Hmm.
um, Peter Parker romance situations.
Um, I have some. I always have a lot of things to say about Gwen's death in the second movie. Um, and I don't know. I would like to hear what you had to say about that, if you have anything to say about it.
No, I think so. The death scene, I mean, putting aside the terrible Green Goblin in that movie, um, but the death scene is really interesting because it's not just her getting stolen away and thrown off this bridge. She's there and demanding that she stays. Like she's choosing sort of obviously not to die or anything like that, but she's telling Peter like, "Hey, I'm staying here and I'm making this choice." And I think she has a lot more agency, even though she does still end up, unfortunately dead at the end. But she has a lot more agency in what she's doing with her life and the decisions she's making and who she wants to be with over the comic book, where like she doesn't really know Peter fully still. She's there with the Green Goblin. She, in theory, doesn't know what's going on or anything, and then she's just dead.
Right. Yeah. My biggest issue with that scene is that very clearly Electro is the main villain in the movie.
Mhm.
And Peter has beaten him, Gwen has helped. She's basically shown him, "Hey, you know, I may not have spider powers, but I can help you. Like I can help turn the tide for you. And then right after that, she gets killed off. And one, in my opinion, if you're gonna kill off Gwen Stacy, frankly, that deserves its own movie. I feel like tacking that on right
Yeah.
after a big boss fight, to me it was narratively very clunky. And I remember just being like, so they're gonna just do the night Gwen Stacy died in 5 minutes, right? and
Yep.
and and I was just like, this is not how you send off this character. And like you said, Emma Stone was an excellent Gwen Stacy. I really liked her. I think she and Andrew Garfield had amazing chemistry. Um and I frankly wanted to see more. I wish there had been a trilogy, whereas Gwen could have continued to provide help and have more agency and everything. And then, maybe at the end of that movie, like maybe she bites off more than she can chew, or maybe, Peter is just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that ends up with her dying. Like, I would have been a lot more accepting of that than I was of, oh, okay, Elektra's dead. Okay, let's kill her now. Timing wise, it just hurt. It really hurt the movie. And I didn't realize for a long time. I'm gonna veer off topic for a second here, but I didn't realize for a long time until Andrew Garfield came back in Spider-Man: No Way Home, how little problems that I actually had with the Amazing Spider-Man franchise in terms of the acting. I felt like all
Yeah.
the acting was great. Like when Andrew Garfield appeared, I was genuinely happy to see him again. I was like, yes, oh my god, I've missed this guy. And it had nothing to do with the acting. That death scene where she's falling is actually very beautifully done. It's heartbreaking. I get it, but it was very badly placed, and I I don't know. I again, I kind of wish we would get a third Andrew Garfield film, but it's the one that I want is probably not the one that everyone else wants. I don't know. Um, let's see what else. Other media. I'm trying to think of Gwen from video games. I'm probably the gamer out of the two of us. I don't know. Are you a big video gamer?
Nintendo Switch. I play some Zelda. I play some Mario, but not a huge gamer by
Okay.
any
Okay.
stretch.
Spider-Gwen has appeared in, I think, Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3. She's also in Lego Marvel Superheroes 2.
Okay.
And I think that's all that I can think of that she appears in. And I mean, she's a fairly standard spider character. She's all right. They play up her youthfulness. There's a point in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3 where your team of superheroes has to fight Miles, Gwen, and Kamala all at the same time.
Yeah.
Because they're the younger superheroes and they've gotten brainwashed and blah blah blah. Um, and it's just kind of one of those, okay, we've beaten them, now let's put them on the team and start using them kind of thing. Um, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is coming out in October of this year. And I don't know if you've seen any of the marketing for it. I'm hugely excited for it.
I have
Um,
not.
oh God. There's there's like a 20-minute video because they did like a 12-minute gameplay trailer. There's like a 20-minute video on my channel of me just reacting to it and going, "Oh my God, this looks so good," you know. But it has Venom in it, and he's voiced by Tony Todd. Do you know who that is?
I don't think I do.
Are you familiar with the Candyman, like the horror
Oh yeah.
franchise? Yeah,
Yes.
that's Tony
Okay.
Todd. Yeah.
Got it.
And Craven's going to be in it. The Lizard's going to be in it. You know, there's all this hype, but Miles is also in it. Like you're going to be able to play both Peter and Miles in the game. And you know, I know there are some people that are already saying, like, if they make another game, like, don't add a third person, don't add Gwen. We've already got two people to switch between. But you know, for my own part, and maybe this is just me being selfish, I want to play as many spider characters as I can, and those games are amazing. I would love to play Gwen as like a fully like level upable like character that you can develop and build on, level up, give her more powers and stuff like that. And you know, like I mean, I think from a pure marketing perspective, you know, if you add a female superhero into the mix, you're going to have at least some women who are going to be like, "Oh, that sounds cool. I want to play that," you know. Um but anyways, I don't know. I'm really like I'm all for trying to bring as many spider people into the games as possible. Um, just because again, I'm selfish. I want to play all of them. I want to play Miguel. I want to play Noir. I want to play Silk. I want to, you know, every single one of them that I can get my hands on. If um, if you heard that Gwen Stacy would be a playable character in Spider-Man 2 or Spider-Man 3 or something, I'm just curious. Like, would that game suddenly be more interesting to you? Like, do you think it would be more kind of like on your radar?
I
I get
definitely think it would because I've played now this was ages ago. I've played Spider-Man video games before. Um but like definitely like I don't even know if they had them for Game Boys, but like back in like the
Hmm.
Game Boy kind of era, you know?
Okay.
And it was always Peter Parker and that's fun and I've always loved Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Um but with those kinds of games, like there's only so much like running around and beating up people you want to, you want to do as the same character. So I think if you have a character with like slightly different um, ways to level up, abilities, whatever,
Hmm.
that it's Gwen, who's a character that I like, that definitely makes it a more intriguing kind of purchase to me. And to your point, if you're somebody that likes to like replay games, I don't want to replay the same game with the same,
Yeah.
same main character.
Yeah. No, I certainly agree. I think, you know, I mean, I so you haven't played the PlayStation 4 Spider-Man game, right?
I have played it, but not played. I've played it
You
like
played a
in a
little bit.
with my brother kind of thing. He's playing it. I'll
Okay.
take the controller for a bit and play it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I mean, like, I think that those games are extremely well written. They are, I mean, they basically took the Batman Arkham game formula and I feel like they applied it to Spider-Man, which is something that I've wanted for years. So I'm happy that I get that. But I really kind of love the way that they are trying to expand it because, like, there's Marvel's Spider-Man and then there's Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. Those two games are out. And Miles, of course, moves a lot like Peter does, but there are some things that Miles can do that Peter absolutely cannot. And Peter, at least in the first game, has access to like a wide array of like gadgets that help him out while he's fighting. Miles has only got like a few kind of like little extra abilities. He doesn't have all of the gadgets. And I really kind of like that differentiation in play styles. And so I feel like if they can continue to build on that, if they can do something equally interesting for Gwen, give her a couple abilities that maybe the guys don't have, you know, like I really feel like they could, you know, very uh what's the word, very plausibly include another character that I mean, for me, the vote would easily be Gwen, but I wouldn't be opposed to Silk or Jessica Drew or someone else, And
Yeah.
I don't know. I keep hoping, I'm pretty sure Spider-Man 2 is going to be very successful when it comes out in October. And I just hope they keep expanding it to include more spider people. So
Yeah. Well, and to your point too, like I like video when I do play video games, like I like games that are really story driven. So then you do really care about what character you're playing with. Like I know I'm maybe you didn't get on this game. I was definitely playing for a while that the iPhone Spider-Man game where you would like collect like you were running through the streets of New York
oh,
basically.
Spider-Man Unlimited?
Yeah, was that Spider-Man Unlimited?
I'm
Yes, yes, yeah.
still mad that they took that game away from me. I'm still mad about it. So yes, no, I played that game.
I played it, but then there was a certain point where I was like, okay, like it was interesting and there was a little bit to it, but I was like, I need more story myself. Like,
Uh-huh.
but that one was cool because you could play as like you could collect different spider characters from my
Yes.
recollection. Yeah.
Yes. It was like an unlimited number of skins. They took like every iteration of like every character and made them playable. And it
Right.
was like,
Yeah, Spider-Man.
yeah. No, oh God, no. I miss that game so much. It's like one of my like there are a couple of things about Spider-Man that I get mad about when I think about them. So like One More Day being one of them. But like they took away Spider-Man Unlimited. I'm still mad about that. I they canceled Spectacular Spider-Man after 2 seasons. I'm still mad about that. So no, I get where you're coming from. I really do. So um what would you say that the big kind of impact and legacy of both original Gwen and Spider-Gwen have for you? I know that original Gwen did not meet a good end, and I know that that has been talked about a lot on the internet and across all kinds of media. Spider-Gwen, on the other hand, she's still young, she's still kicking butt. What do these two characters mean to you as a comics reader?
So I'll start with Spider-Gwen because that's probably the easier one to
Okay.
answer. Well, the Spider-Gwen to me is somebody that, like, if I were talking to somebody that just wanted to get into comics or like a young person that was interested in comic books, I would totally point them to Spider-Gwen because I think it's great storytelling. There are women, there are a lot of women characters in the comic in general. Gwen's a strong character. There's still a lot of that angst as we were talking about earlier. It kind of has everything that you want in a comic. You get a tragic backstory, you get some angst.
Right.
um she's, at least when it starts, she's a teenager, so it's really relatable for a lot of people that are starting to think about getting into comic books. So to me, like, Spider-Gwen's probably, if somebody came to me and they were like, hey, I want to read about a female comic book character, like a superhero,
Hmm.
probably Gwen is the first like where I would direct them, because I think even with the modern ones, like Silk had a rocky start for me personally. Um, the older ones like Jessica Drew, Spider-Woman, like those 70s comics, I've read them, but they're not, I would not direct somebody who's looking to just start getting interested in comics. I wouldn't say like, oh, go read 1970s Jessica Drew,
Right.
Spider-Woman to start there.
Hmm.
So I think, it's new enough where somebody could start from the beginning and catch up. You get your strong female characters, and you can read that entire series still, and you don't feel like, unlike Spider-Man, where you're like, oh my god, I have a minimum of 700 comic books to read.
Right.
um
Yeah.
at bare minimum, Spider-Gwen's one where you can sort of start from the beginning if you want.
Only
And
about 100.
right, hey, that's a lot, but 100 from 2000, so way less text on the page too to read.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. All right. And then what about original Gwen Stacy?
I have a really soft spot in my heart for original Gwen Stacy. I feel
Hmm.
like maybe throughout this I haven't talked her up as much as you know, I haven't been able to defend her as much as maybe I wanted to because there are, a lot of like storyline, not great storylines and things like that with her. Um, but I always liked Gwen Stacy, not as just like a rival for MJ or anything like that. I always thought she was uh, a fun romantic lead to read, even though that's maybe all she was. But like when I read things like Spider-Man Blue, I always loved it, and I always felt like Gwen Stacy gave Peter that sort of tragic backstory. Obviously, everybody says Uncle Ben, but Uncle Ben, you don't really in those original comics don't really see his death. So whereas with Gwen Stacy, you see a lot more of that. You get to see the relationship, whether or not it's perfectly portrayed in the comics or not, or if she has enough agency, which she doesn't. But at least you see her over the course of these years and in these comics getting built up as a character that's sticking around. And
Hmm.
then her tragic death, I think, does um, drive Peter in a lot of ways. And I think, you know, whether or not this undermines her as a character, like it gave him a lot of push and fodder for future um,
It
comics.
did. It did. And I mean, like I've heard some people call it like the original fridging of, of a female character for a male character's pain and emotional growth and everything. And I mean, that's difficult to debate, it very much is like Green Goblin kidnapped her to get to Spider-Man, she dies and Spider-Man is the one that snaps and goes crazy and nearly kills him, and then decides not to. Like it's very that's a very difficult thing to kind of look past, and especially I can't remember who it was. Someone I can't remember who it was that coined the term fridging. Someone fairly well known that I'm gonna not remember and kick myself for not remembering, but she, she basically said that, like, I think it was Kyle Rayner's girlfriend from DC Comics,
Mm-hmm.
where he found her literally in the refrigerator because someone had come in by and killed her. But
Oh my
but
god.
Gwen Stacy is, like I don't know that I can think of any earlier examples for that, but it is something that tends to disproportionately seem to affect women in these kinds
Yep.
of stories. And it's funny too because that happened. Did you watch the Deadpool movies?
Yes.
Okay, so in Deadpool 2, Vanessa is definitely fridged. Like
Oh
she
yeah.
definitely is fridged. And the funny thing is that when people pointed that out to I think the director and the producers of the movie and everything, they still had no idea what that. They were like, "What? What are you talking about?" Like,
Yep.
and it's just kind of like there's a little bit of, I don't want to say they come by it honestly. I don't think it's willful ignorance per se, but it's just kind of like, again, kind of like with things, kind of like with properties that find interesting stories and happiness and build people up. I feel like it's slowly starting to turn around in those fields as well, as we kind of gradually develop a little bit more of an awareness of other people's lived experiences. And but it's still kind of one of those things where it's like, wow, this is still happening today, And
Yeah.
I hope, at least for me, that original Gwen Stacy's, legacy as that particular first symbol of refrigeration, I suppose, um, is something that people will reference and go, we can do better than this. We can definitely do better than this. And again, I know I'm kind of inadvertently attacking Jerry Conway again, but and I mean, to be fair, like whenever I bring up Jerry Conway, it's usually in relation to this, and I'm like, why did he do that? I've read a lot of Jerry Conway's work, and he has written some really good stuff. But I mean, this is kind of the big one. So, um, as for Spider Gwen, I can't. tell you how much I love that character. Um, I I remember writing in my review for Amazing Spider Talk, like, this, keep your eyes on this one, guys. Like, again, lightning in a bottle. This one is going to blow up, and I mean, I'm happy to say I still have that comic book too. I'm
Oh
like, yes, that's
yeah.
one of my it's one of the crown jewels of my Spider-Man collection. I don't know if I'll ever get all of Amazing, but I've at least got that one, so I'm happy about it. But what I really like is the kind of depth of character that she has gotten in the last. I mean, Peter has 60 plus years of stories behind him. Miles and Gwen, like this Gwen, have got like 10, you know?
Yeah.
And they've really come a long way in a long time. And I really kind of like that, um, especially like in the movies. I think that the movies did a lot for both characters. And I feel like, particularly in Across the Spider-Verse, Gwen is they're one of my previous guests said they're like co-protagonist, and they really are, because like the first 15 minutes of the movie starts off in Gwen's dimension, where she's talking to her dad and trying to come out to him as Spider-Woman, and he pulls a gun on her and everything, and it's just like, my God, you see where that darkness is coming from, you see where that angst is coming from. And then she finds the Spider Society. She finds this other home. She's trying to protect her place in it. And to do that, she has to hurt Miles. And
Yeah.
she knows she's hurting Miles. And she feels bad about hurting Miles. And she's still hurting Miles. And then, like, at the end, when they're chasing Miles and she catches him on her web, and like they have that moment of eye to eye contact, and she's like, please, I'm trying to, and he just like, he gives her this look and he just rips the web away, and you could just see the heartbreak on her face.
Yeah.
And it's just like I really like that she's a character that in just 10 years or so, you can care for her and put her through the ringer as much as you've ever done with Peter, and you can say the same about Miles too. But like, again, like Gwen, it's just like, you know, I love this relatively new iteration of Spider-Man, and I want her to stick around for 60 plus years, at this point. So, um, I think we're pretty much at the conclusion of this little talk. Is there anything else that you would like to say about Gwen Stacy, Jaleh? Anything about original Gwen or Spider Gwen? Any what they mean to you? What their impact on you as a reader and a consumer of Spider-Man media has been, and anything at all?
I'll just say that, Gwen is obviously somebody that, especially now, a lot of people are familiar with who Gwen Stacy was, and despite her original Gwen Stacy maybe not being the most fleshed out character or having, the best backstory or anything, she obviously struck enough people where somebody was like, you know what, I want to create Spider-Gwen now and really give her like a fleshed out backstory and add some depth to this character. And I think, that's a testament to hopefully how comics are continuing to change in a positive way,
Hmm.
and where we get more interesting characters, whether they be iterations of ones that we can all name off the top of our head, or, new characters as well.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. I really love kind of the shape that the Spider Verse has taken in the last 10 to 15 years. The comic Spider Verse story aside, of course. Um, I mean, I'll acknowledge its importance. It does need to exist in order for us to have a lot of what we have now, but
Yep.
I do like that at least it has brought forth more emphasis on characters like Gwen and Miles and Silk and all of these types of people. And now that they're here, I don't think they're going anywhere. And again, I love Peter Parker. Like, if you ask me which Spider-Man is my favorite, I'm probably going to say Peter Parker, but that does not mean that I don't think there is a place for Miles and Spider-Gwen and all of the spiders that have come to kind of take the mantle besides him, you know? And, it's kind of one of the reasons that I really want them to age Peter up a little bit and like put him in a mentor role, Coach Parker, Peter Parker meets Ted Lasso, I think. I think that would be awesome because I love Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is another show where positivity is interesting and great and wholesome, and I think, I think Peter Parker could be a version of Ted Lasso, So,
Definitely.
yeah, put me in, coach, like he could be running plays with the spider people. I think it could be a thing, Um, but really, this has been a really nice talk. It's been a wonderful opportunity for me to catch up with you. Jaleh, where can people find you online if you would even like to be found?
If you want to find me online, both on my Instagram, which I'm much more active on, and Twitter or X or whatever they call it, which I'm very much not active on, but under both, you can find me under PB and Jaleh, like peanut butter and jelly, but PB and Jaleh.
Nice, very nice. You might consider giving Threads a try. Like ever since the whole Twitter X debacle, I've basically disowned it, and I've gone over to Threads. I know that Dan Gavosdin and Mark Giannacchio are active on Threads, so you
Oh,
you'd
good.
you'd find some fellow spider fans over there. So
And hopefully a little bit less uh, enthusiastic, but maybe not in the quite same way that Twitter Spider-Man
yeah,
fans are.
maybe we'll see. It's it's
Too-
still it's still relatively young and growing, so hopefully it has a chance to grow organically. But anyways, I don't know. I didn't mean to shill for Threads or anything. It's where I am too. So, but I just want to say thank you for coming on and talking about Gwen Stacy with me. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, take care. It's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And we are back and live once again. I'd like to take this opportunity again to thank Jaleh for coming onto the show and doing this discussion with me. It was good to catch up and just talk about this particular section of Spider-Man lore with her. I hope you enjoyed us digging into the character of Gwen Stacy, as we certainly had a lot of fun making it happen. And I believe that brings us to the end of the show. If you enjoyed this episode of The Webline, please be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube channel, simply named Spidey Librarian, where the podcast is live streamed regularly and where I maintain a playlist for the live streams. The Webline is also available on audio services, so when you see us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or another such service, please leave a review and rating, and if you can, follow us. You can find me on my socials under the name Spidey Librarian on Threads, Twitter X, Instagram, WordPress, and Twitch. And finally, if you'd like to shoot me an email, you can contact me at spideylibrarian@gmail.com, where I'll be happy to hear your thoughts, rants, and ideas. Who knows? Your email might be featured in an upcoming episode. Jaleh, my glorious guest for today's episode, is active on both Twitter X and Instagram under the handle at PB and Jaleh. I'm going to go ahead and spell it out. PB underscore and AND underscore Jaleh. JALEH. Be sure to join us next Sunday on the Webline, where I'll be doing a tier list that will not be a solo episode. I'll have my guest, Steve Moore, joining me, and we'll be rating and placing classic comic book covers on the tier maker list from Amazing Fantasy 15 and Amazing Spider-Man, the first 20 or so issues from the 1960s. It'll be a jam-packed discussion full of commentary, classic artwork, and lots of Spider-Man covers. Thank you for listening, and until the next episode, I'll be wishing you a good day. Bye.